All right, hello, welcome to Making Moves, where every week myself and Kieran Antill get sent a few headlines and articles about companies making moves in their market that week. In other words, repositioning themselves in some way, whether that be to realize an opportunity or to lean into and rival new competition in their category. Always in under 15 minutes, always unscripted, always unedited, and always with the assistance of some sort of cognitive lubricant. So what are you drinking this week, Kieran?
I have gone straight up fasting style lemon juice that maybe I went too heavy on.
What's your lemon juice face? Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Very
I went
nice.
too heavy.
Well, we're recording this particular one in the morning, so I'm old school coffee, liter, nothing too exciting.
Otherwise, like to say the reusable.
Yes, exactly. All right, so this week we have decided to talk about Optus. And,
yes.
Kind of an interesting, possibly brand platform kind of repositioning, led by a pseudo sort of PR announcement from new CEO Stephen Rue. We're on it, kind of coming out in his voice and his promise, but as a platform that they promise to be investing in further as the year goes on. So kind of an interesting one. Not completely unique or completely new, but I think lots of interesting stuff to talk about in terms of, what does it mean for this to be led by the CEO? What does it mean, the nature of this kind of we're on it positioning? And obviously it's in the context of some pretty interesting news from their big rivals, Telstra and Vodafone, or TPG, in recent weeks as well. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it sparked me to look up kind of more, what other CEO-led campaigns have been out there, and kind of can consider them in two categories of kind of the reactive, oh crap, we've screwed up kind of things, or whether the CEO themselves is the issue, whether we're talking about an Alan Joyce sort of impact onto Qantas at a time to do with profits. In this case, it's obviously not the CEO per se is doing, but also got me to sort of look up prior positions where I believe Stephen is a former CFO of NBN before stepping into that role, which sort of begs that question of the definition that we obviously always push, which is that brand is the reputation of your business, and that therefore the CEO being chief brand officer, it particularly often pulled in when it's a reputation based idea, whether because there's been damage or whether like we're trying to reposition with reputation in mind. So anyway, that made me just sort of think, right, so really we're talking about Stephen in a position of CFO, probably doesn't think of himself directly as a marketer, so CFO to CEO, and in this role, really a CBO, a chief brand officer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of narrative around the we're on it kind of positioning, repositioning, and platform itself, and people are saying, well, does that mean they weren't on it before? And is it too reactionary and apology based to be a kind of optimistic and proactive platform idea? And I think the context is important here. I like personally that it's come from the CEO. I think if this was a marketing department campaign, it might seem a little bit like a veneer and a little bit surface level, but coming from the CEO, I think it has really interesting promise. But that's all it is at the moment, right? It's a promise. But what I like about it is we obviously at Nilo talk a lot about company-wide approach to marketing. as a promise coming from a CEO, I find it kind of juicy. If that whole organization can now orient itself around we're on it, what does that mean for their, we've got promised more promotions, I guess, later in the year, this brand platform that's going to come out of the back of this, which is great. But what does it mean for the way they service their customers? What does it mean for their packages and their pricing and their product? What does it mean for, obviously, their service levels and cyber and stuff like that is obviously, right at the forefront of this. But what does it mean in terms of how they are on it right across the organization, across all the things, to your point, that add up to create the reputation of the business? It has real potential to be really galvanizing for the organization, but also be really stimulating in terms of innovation. Like, how can they innovate being on it across all those different parts of the organization?
We kind of, when we first saw those headlines, we were talking about the timing of this as well. Like, why isn't this campaign at the time of the crisis, the triple zero stuff, and there was sort of data leaks and things like that? And that it partly goes to what you're talking about, which is because it would be full of shit then, right? Like, obviously things weren't happening for a number of reasons, and it's very complicated why that is. So operational reasons why those things are not happening. So if you immediately just go, oh yeah, we're sorry, you've got more change between now and Wednesday, like, it doesn't really work. So, you certainly hope that they're doing these things. I think the reason to use a CEO is often about accountability, and companies as large as Optus and as complex as their ownership structures are, it is about an internal campaign as much as it is about external. It's public accountability, saying, I'm out here, I'm saying this. The internal meeting is going to be, by the way, you better make sure that this happens because I've just stuck my neck out and put it out there.
Exactly. And that's where I hope it doesn't just become the brand platform idea for a comms campaign, and actually does become a promise. Does become a promise that comes along. Well, exactly. But I mean, they've got a track record here as well. I know you probably looked into this a little bit more than I did, but you were complimentary over the yes stuff and how that had actually infiltrated across their culture. So they've got, and this isn't disconnected from that really. It's not a leap away from that as a cultural and brand concept.
Yeah.
So they've got a track record of having a kind of campaign that connects their culture.
Yeah, no, for sure. My favorite one before we run out of time would definitely be the CEO Luca Di Maio for Renault, more proactively talking about the sort of the car should feel optimistic and basically taking a war on colour. That to me is, I don't know, actually didn't look up where Renault sales were at, but I love that as a position of saying we're not going to have monochromatic cars anymore. We're from Italy. This is a country full of colour and vibrancy and everything. And France is okay, close enough. And ultimately, that whole war on not doing black and white vehicles, which is just what everyone's buying, and that's just putting a position in. But I loved in that case, which could have been delivered by anyone, but the fact that they put the CEO in it, I mean, you don't apologize for making black and white cars, but they are basically saying, look, we're going to be the fun car, the colorful car. Those are the examples I see where you put a CEO in, it talks about operational change for the organization.
Well, there's two things like I find interesting in the telco category here, though, which is when Vodafone came out with their new campaign a few weeks ago, which we spoke about, which is about reach and stuff like that. But they very publicly talked about all the things that they put in place before they came out with the campaign to be able to deliver on the promise, right? So very clear message of, some of our competitors might have a promise, but they haven't put the stuff underneath that promise. We have. Mm-hmm. And this is similar, led by the CEO. Like you said, timing is interesting. It's not, the day after the service shortages and things like that. It's kind of the implication is we've taken time to address all these things, and now we're on it. And I think that's interesting, and it's obviously both directly pointing fingers at Telstra, and it comes at a time where Telstra have moved on from Brent Smart, which signifies.
I don't know if they moved on from Brent Smart. I don't know whether what the circumstances of him leaving, but.
Sorry, I mean moving on from the Brent Smart era is what I mean, right?
Yeah. That to me is regardless of Brent himself and his role, but and there's obviously other factors in this Optus thing and also Virgin, but you've seen a very active Telstra kind of woke the beast. They're spending large and they're doing really interesting out there creative work. That drives the internal conversations of like, we've got to do something at Virgin, we've got to do something at Optus. So I think you have to have that all the time. When one of your competitors starts making noise or splashes or outspending, inevitably you see the others have to start doing it because they but it goes in these fluxes. All of a sudden, big spin, and then they'll back off. And I'm interested after Brent Smart, whether Telstra will ultimately simmer way back down. We won't see that effect probably until after Christmas.
And that's exactly what I mean. I wasn't implying that there was anything kind of nefarious there, but it's interesting timing for these challenges to be piping up in response. Brent obviously leaving Telstra, remains to be seen what the next kind of phase or era looks like for them. But it is good to see that it's sparked this kind of activity, innovation, investment in that category. It's kind of curious to watch and see how that plays out commercially and in terms of market dynamics over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. They could have done an AI ad, but they put the real human in it, the CEO in it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I like I said, I find it quite exciting, given what we talk about in terms of the horizontal marketing function and the need for a CEO to be, have a role in that. So I really hope we have a great case study for a CEO-fronted brand platform that therefore is orchestrated across the whole organization end to end.
I think we will. I think they're going to do lots of really interesting things.
Yeah, great. As opposed to becomes a comms campaign.
Well, yeah. I mean, they do a lot of things relatively well through the retail activations and everything, but I think that they've sort of become a bit boring. I think they got very used to sports, World Cup, and that was sort of the absolute focus is on sports and entertainment, and they've sort of ultimately, while I've got a lot of complimentary things to say, Optus kind of became a motion graphics brand. Swirling, swirly thingies, cool, looks good, nice, great, but like it means nothing. This is going to give them a bit more meat. And I like a CEO who says, I'm going to put he's definitely putting his neck on the line publicly saying this. So I would imagine, if nothing else, there'll be a bunch of activity.
Absolutely. All right. As always, good chat. Until next week. Cheers.
See you, mate.